Hey everyone, this is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Marching Roundtable podcast. With me tonight, award-winning children's book author and illustrator, DJ Corchin. How are you, DJ?
Good. How are you, Tim? Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for coming back to talk again. Everybody, you can find other podcasts where I've talked to DJ before. DJ, there's lots of cool stuff going on. And we have such a great topic tonight talking about expectations and how that can trip you up and how you need to think about that. I think this is going to be very, very helpful to anybody. But first, in case anybody doesn't know who you are, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. So, DJ Corchin. I'm like Tim said, I'm a children's author and illustrator. In the band world, probably people know my Band Nerds book series the most. They're all humorously inspiring anecdotes about band. If you've been in band, if you've seen band, if you know how to spell the word band, these books are for you. They're hilarious. But I also write other more traditional style books, and we can even talk about some of the topics later today as it pertains to expectations in the musical and marching arts world.
Cool. And if somebody wanted to check out your stuff, where would they find it online?
Yeah, super easy. Just go to myname.com. So djcorchin.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, wherever it's not cyber world anymore. It's metaverse, wherever the metaverse may take you.
I refuse to adopt that phrase. So anyway, everybody, really easy to find, DJ, all your stuff. So thanks for agreeing to talk with me tonight. I think this is such an interesting conversation. Why expectations? Tell me why you've been thinking about this.
When we talk about band, we talk about the marching world, we talk about life 101. That's the big cliche everybody throws out. We teach life, and there was no better wall that was thrown up around life than when COVID hit, and in particular in the marching world or in the band world. You think about it, its very existence really relies on being together, and not only that, blowing air, which is just something we just can't do, and having physical barriers over our faces. And so everybody really had to pivot, and I was really proud of the community because they really started to let go of what their expectations were, and allow themselves to experiment more than ever before. So in many ways, if we were to look at what kind of upside it is, it was a little freeing for people. They weren't bound by the same rules, unofficial rules, if you would, of running a marching program. And so that's when innovation happens, when you have to innovate. And so I love the topic around expectations. And I'm looking forward to kind of diving deeper around what that means for not just the marching world, but also like music education in general.
Yeah, and I think personally too, like I think sometimes having too many expectations or the wrong expectations, or assuming your expectations have to come true, like this is the way to just always be frustrated and unhappy. And I've had enough of being frustrated and unhappy the last couple of years. So I think a lot of people are having this conversation. It's interesting you mentioned this about the marching world, of course, because I just had this conversation with someone last week. They were talking about how much they loved drum corps this summer. And they said they thought it was because there were no rules. Everybody could do whatever they wanted. Everybody sort of chose what they wanted to present. So it wasn't like we're all trying to, do what we think the judges want and win these points, whatever. Everybody was just doing their thing. And it was awesome, and so I'm hoping that we sort of can keep a little bit of that. I know how the competitive world works. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with competition, but I feel like that's an example that everybody knows that we just recently saw.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, like I said, when we're forced to innovate, is when the best of us comes out, when creativity comes out, because in many ways we were forced to really truly put up or shut up in terms of like music education and the marching arts of the value of it, and we had to see how we can continue to sustain it even in this place. And I love that you were talking to people about how there was so much excitement around a time when there probably on the surface shouldn't be excitement. Like, this is terrible things are happening, but the reality is that it really got our imagination going. And I'll tell you, the concept of expectations came from a story in band camp, which is where all great stories come from. I learned it from a guy who, ironically, for some reason, his name was Rabbit. That's what they called him. It was at like one of those leadership ropes course type things. And it was awesome because he did this exercise, and he would always say, while he was doing this trick, I can't do it here because it doesn't work with Zoom, but what I would say, he would always say, don't let your expectations get in the way of your perception. Don't let your expectations get in the way of your perception. And then he would do his exercise, and we would just guess wrong. And what I loved about that is I pulled it into a phrase of not letting your expectations get in the way of your perception. So not letting your expectations of what you think something should be get in the way of seeing what it could be. And that's what COVID did for us, is it blew away our expectations. Nobody had expectations. You're like, if you do anything, it's going to be great because it's better than nothing. And so that really was super freeing. And when we talk about on your personal life, you had this idea. I remember growing up, and maybe you did too, Tim, like when I was like 10, I was like, okay, by 23, I'm going to get married. By 27, I'm going to have a kid, right? Like, and those expectations have probably changed over the years, but still, I feel like kids have a plan of what their life's going to lay out. And I don't know a single person that it came anywhere close. It's like, trying to plan the perfect wedding. It's not going to happen. And so, when you let go of those expectations, you're just kind of like, all right, world, what can I do? And that is where you're open to ideas. And so this is where expectations bleeds into creative ideation. Because if, let's say you have a group trying to figure out, we'll use marching band as an example, right? Trying to figure out the perfect show, and somebody came into the meeting already with the idea of here's what the show is going to be, here's what it's going to happen. Well, there's no ideation, there's no brainstorming, there's no fun, there's no creativity. It's all this person's ideas, and so there's no exploration. Even when there's like restrictions put into play around, like, well, this is what it's going to be, but you can play around with this part, or you can play around with this part. You have to be open to making a good idea great, and that's how it happens. The more people, it's really about inclusion. The more people you include in your ideas, the more you can perceive what things could be outside of it. If that makes any sense at all.
No, absolutely. I mean, as a creative person, I understand this really intimately. Like the fewer expectations I can have up front, the better things often go, or at least the more parameters the more ability to try new things, go outside the box. This is something band directors are really bad at. I just got to say, band directors are terrible at this because they know it works for them. They're very nervous about it. They want the band to sound good and look good. I completely understand. I was a band director, everybody, for 10 years. I understand this. You bring somebody in, what are they going to say the wrong thing? Like, people are very nervous, and band directors, I think, are especially bad at this. But especially when you're talking about the creative world, putting your show together, I think band directors really need to challenge themselves to let that go, be open-minded, see where the conversation goes. And I do think that the whole shutdown experience has helped people with that.
Oh, 100%. It took away the things that everybody was comfortable with, right? It took away their plan, like their cut and paste plan for every year. And that's scary. And when there's fear involved, there's resistance. And that's fair. And, just so listeners don't think that I'm just a children's author that writes about like monkeys and boogers and I'm throwing down the gauntlet on marching, I was a band director for a little bit, not quite as long as you were, but and I marched in a show called Blast, which I think a lot of marching people are familiar with. But when I was teaching, the hardest thing I had to do wasn't the kids; it was other adults, right? Like, how do you bring together people that are strong opinion, and we all know band directors can be strongly opinionated, but also different ways of working, different concepts of leadership, different ways of having programs. How do you bring those people together and create a culture of positive brainstorming? So this is where, one of my children's books is not specific about band, but highly is based off of like band directors. It's called 1,000 No's. And it's a lot of times people think it's about rejection because they hear the old phrase, which is, oh, it takes 1,000 no's to get to your big yes. And I actually challenge that idea. It's not about rejection. It's about discovery. And that's why it's important to let go of those expectations. And that no's are part of the process, which I think anybody that's been a mature professional over the years, like, learns that lesson. But how do we learn that lesson earlier, to understand that when somebody doesn't like an idea, it's still contributing to it, because you never know when it can trigger something else, or somebody has a better idea, or they make it better, or they don't like that idea, but they say, oh, what about this? And somebody says a word that reminds them of their time at Aunt Sally's Thanksgiving, which created this amazing decor, which is like, oh, this is what our flags are going to look like. I mean, you just never know how these dots connect. But if you're not open to them, then you're not going to discover your yes. It's not about getting to the end. It's about being open so that when the yes comes along, you're going to be able to see it. You don't have those blinders on.
Yeah, and also you might be going down a road you don't need to be going down. So sometimes hearing a no can be really helpful. Like I do a lot of consultation where people will say, well, here's what we're thinking about for our show idea, whatever, and I would be like, okay, because I mean, I've done so many shows now, DJ. It's like I can say, oh man, I tried that in 1980, whatever, and I can tell you why you don't want to do that, or you should do it just this little bit different, because you know how it is, DJ. It's like when you're playing in the middle of a book, you get in it, and you're so in it. And I see this all the time. I go work with a band, and like they're so in the middle of it. And I love this idea of I'm coming in from outside, and I'm looking with different eyes from a different filter, and I can go like, why is that happening right over there? And they'll all be like, oh, we didn't even know that was going on over there. They're so in the middle of it. So I feel like this is really helpful for people in all the different capacities of what band directors and instructors do, is to have the idea of, okay, let me listen to all of that input and what those no's are, and see where's it coming from, because it might really be helpful.
Well, and there's two things you have to do ahead of time. One is you have to establish that this is going to be your culture, that you are, hey, listen, we want to hear it all, but we can't go with it all. So thank you for providing all these no's so that we can discover it. You have to establish that first. Otherwise, people don't know that that's what you're doing. Otherwise, they just think you're, just departing your knowledge on them and, being holier than thou around that. But that's not what you're doing. You're trying to help them. The second thing that you have to do is establish a baseline of what you're trying to accomplish. However, still be open to solving other issues, right? So when you bring somebody in, like Tim, you might specialize in something, but that's not the only thing you do. And so you have to be open to letting go of the original goal and saying, oh, we actually are going to solve this problem because this is better. So again, it's all about discovery in all aspects of it, in all facets of it.
Yeah, I love that you just said that, because everybody listening to this, by the way, we just did a webinar with Tom Hooten, who is the principal trumpet in the LA Philharmonic, but probably the best trumpet player on the planet, if not one of the top, or a few. And this is so interesting you said this, DJ, because he talks about when he works with young trumpet players, they come to him, they play for him, he says a lot of the time he ends up not talking very much about how they're playing their trumpet, but about things like, well, time management or goal setting, or like things that are about their life that are in the way of them being able to spend the time they need or have the right perception toward their work with the trumpet. So it's really interesting. Like, the world is not black and white, and there's a lot of things that influence success.
Oh, so one of the books I'm actually writing, I'll let your listeners in on a little secret. Nobody knows this yet. Is I'm writing a children's book all about you can be more than one thing, and awesome. you should be, right. So when we are asked as kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? The expectation is you say something, like a thing, usually an occupation, right? So I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a rock star, whatever it is. So I challenge kids when I go talk to them to say 3 things and see what they see if somebody says, oh, well, no, you got to pick one. Because Tim, you run a wonderful podcast, but that's not who you are. That's not all that you do. You're into fitness. You do all these other things, right? So you can be a doctor and a dancer. You can be a senator and a swimmer. You can be an astronaut if you're really good at math. Like, you can do more than one thing, and you should be. And in fact, if you were to ask any adult right now, because that plan did not go as expected, if you ask a teacher, they probably have like a wonderful love of painting or traveling the world, and those are the things that define us. And so we really need to look at not just the act to go back to the trumpet player, is that he was sharing, like, listen, it's not just all about playing. You have to tie into other skill sets, and it's not just about the muscles and the ears. Like, that's not what it's all about.
Man, you are like hitting all the things I want. I love this conversation, DJ, because I think this is so important. And not to like be talking only about the webinars, but there was another webinar that Daniel Morrison did with Michael Martin, another great trumpet player, right? Michael Martin plays professionally in a symphony orchestra. They had a conversation about what it was called "When More is More: The Benefit of Pursuing Many Interests," and that was exactly what they were talking about. Was Michael Martin, this great trumpet player? He tells the story on that. And this is I love that you have a children's book about this, because I think this is so valuable. Parents want their kid to decide to become a professional baseball player at age 11, and I'm like, that is the worst thing that could happen to a kid anywhere. Anyway, Daniel and Mike Martin are talking about when he was trying to audition to get a job as a professional trumpet player in a major symphony orchestra. He wasn't working. It wasn't doing well. It wasn't working. He decided to start doing CrossFit. He tells this story in the webinar. He started doing CrossFit, this whole other thing that changed his perception of himself, his priorities. He realized that he could do a lot of things, focus on a lot of things, and still be one of the world's great trumpet players. And you know what happened? The next audition, he got it. This is one of the stories they tell. Everybody go find those webinars. I guess I'm hawking
awesome.
trumpet webinars tonight, but they're both great stories. But DJ, I love this idea that you can do more than one thing. Students need to know that, and parents need to hear this too.
Well, and those are really great examples of amazing players. And what I would say is the creative types, this is forced upon them because how do I say this? We don't make a lot of money and generally. And so we're forced to find other skills to do this. And that, that's not a bad thing when we talk about it, but it is something that we need to talk about, because the odds of somebody playing professionally and making a living wage by doing nothing other than that are really low. And I would love to live in a world, Tim, where we could pay with art, not for it. That would be just an amazing, spectacular world we could live in, but we don't. And so we have to fight, obviously, that the good fight, which is arts are what makes a good human being, and they have to be part of it. But we have to go beyond just the homogenous look of, we're going to do this one thing and that's it. I did want to go back to one other concept when we're talking about 1,000 No's with the around idea growing, because one of the things that this is also about when we talk about expectations, it's about idea ownership. And some people call it ego, but it's like, that's my show. I made that show. But the reality, Tim, is that if you write a show, you give it to somebody else, they do something with it and it becomes their own. They interpret it, they make it beautiful or even more beautiful, and that's a really cool thing. And when you could give that away instead of constantly saying, you have to say Tim every single time, this is Tim's ownership, right? And so I'll give you an example. I worked for Apple for 17 years. I don't work for them anymore. Loved it. It was amazing. And I had an amazing conversation with somebody in the uber inner circle, like one of their industrial designers literally designs their devices. And I sat down with him, and this dude was super cool, Tim. Like, he's just what you pictured. He walked out with his sunglasses, t-shirt, jeans, just looked like he'd been out all night on a Tuesday night, probably because he was. And I'm sitting down with him, and I have about 45-minute conversation with him. And I was being a little cheeky, and I asked him, I was like, hey man, when at the time it was Steve Jobs, it wasn't Tim. And I said, hey, when you see Steve up there and he's like presenting the next iPhone, and you hear that voice come on and it starts turning and showing the corner of that iPhone and that really slick corner. Do you ever sit back and you go, that corner? I did that. I designed that. And I thought I was being like funny and kind of like honest about it. And he just didn't crack a smile. He didn't think it was hilarious at all. Like, and he goes, TJ, it's my worst impression of him, but it's actually pretty close. He goes, it's not like that, man. I go, what do you mean? He goes, even if I developed that corner, by the time it got to that picture up there, so many people had added their creativity to it and changed it that it was ours. And he had zero ownership of it. Like, the dude didn't go around saying like, yeah, I designed the iPhone. He just doesn't talk that way. And it was all about, he didn't have that ego around it. And the idea became whatever version of the iPhone that everybody went crazy for. And I think that is such a wonderful way to teach. I think it's a wonderful way to build a program. I think it's a wonderful way to teach building a program with student leadership. Imagine having a world where the students didn't care if they got like credit for like whatever amazing idea it was. It was just all about that it made the group better and the band better. And it's selflessness, it's ego, but I mean, and it's the band director's job to throw out the recognition and make sure that they feel good about it. But imagine working in that kind of atmosphere. Like that would, it blew my mind. And it was a life-changing conversation, even though I felt like a total, jerk because I was trying to be funny and it wasn't time to be funny, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, you didn't know him that well, and that's a totally legitimate interaction. I love that. I gotta tell you, I'm sitting here thinking, what this is making me think of, everybody, is I've done over 1,000 podcast recordings now. I've done hundreds of webinars. I've been really lucky to get to talk, DJ. I get to talk to like the best people. Like they're so smart and they're so talented. And I've talked to a lot of people. But what's interesting and what's absolutely true is what you just said, which is the people at the very, very top of their game. People winning DCI, winning Bands of America, either designer, instructor, band director, whatever they are, man, they never worry about or focus on or think about or talk about like who did what. It's like, look what we all did. They're always that way, and I will talk to somebody who wrote a drill for a DCI winning corps, and they're all like, oh no, this wasn't me. Like, this was a team. Like, they will say that every single time because it's true. And then, of course, if you ever meet young designers who are not so sure of themselves and can have a lot of that ego in there, then they do want the credit. And I think that just has to do with, when we're all young, we're insecure, we need that sort of build up from people. But I guess the point is, the more you become a mature professional in your profession, the less and less that matters. The more it's about the kids, the more it's about the show and not about you. And that has played out with every conversation I've had for the last 10 years.
I couldn't agree more. I would say seasoned validation is more impactful after you've had that experience than quick validation with no patience. Like, you talk about the young versus old, it's really new versus experienced. Like, somebody that's at the top of the game that's been doing it for years, they still get that validation, right? That comes, but it's so much more powerful when you've enlightened lives and made people better because of it. That to me is so much, like, I think about some of the high school band directors that have been around forever that are like that you said, right? They would never say like, oh yeah, my group's amazing, right? They would just never say that. Just they don't use that phrase. But if you talk to some of the newer people, and to be fair, like, sometimes that's how careers are made, that validation. Like, I don't want to totally just say like, hey, it's not worth anything. Yeah,
I don't mean to be talking down to anybody who's in that place, because we've all started there. We all need to grow. But my point is, be aware of the concepts and the thinking around the people that are doing this at the very highest level. And I think it goes to expectations too, because those band directors at the highest level, they really do most care about the experience their students are having and
Yeah.
building great citizens for the future. Like that's really what they think about. And then you know what? They happen to win Grand Nationals. Okay, that's awesome. I'm so happy for my whole
Yeah.
team and my students. But like, what are they really focusing on? It's like, how can I make my students grow and be better? So again, that's what their expectation is. Their expectation is I'm building great kids through teaching music, not my expectation is can I win the next contest? That's a
Right.
huge
Well, hopefully.
sea change.
Yep. Well, and so I propose a name change that instead of music educator or well, instead of music educator, it's educator of music, right? Because I think there is as a writer, I'm a big fan of words and meanings of words, and that educator of education comes first, right? And there is a difference between education and schooling that hopefully any like mature professional will recognize and acknowledge. But we talk about it all the time, and that's why people are say, "Oh, my band director's, my favorite teacher," not because she or he won Grand Nats or DCI, whatever it is. It's probably because when their grandparents got sick, they listened, and so again, I think you can tie this back to expectations. Is like, what's your expectations of your profession? And can you let go of those and discover what impact you could actually make? I remember going into college and saying, I want to be a band director. And that's really what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a band director. And I think, because I mean, well, I shouldn't say everybody. I was really stupid at that age, but it was important to me to have a band program. And I was wrong and I missed it. And that's not, and I remember my first year teaching, getting a huge education around that. And I'm so glad I did because it flipped my heart around right in the right way. And it just got the blood pumping in the right direction. So yeah, when we talk about expectations personally, it's like, well, okay, what's your expectation of what you want to accomplish in whatever, whether it's a marching band program or, a successful podcast or an educator.
Yeah, and just to reference back, I mentioned the Tom Hooten webinar. He also tells a story of the turning point in his trumpet playing when he was a student learning, was with the day that he decided to stop thinking of himself as a trumpet player and start thinking of himself as a musician. And it flipped a switch in his head, and all of a sudden it took some pressure off. It changed his concept, and suddenly he was playing differently. And everybody was asking. He said literally the next week, everybody was saying, "What did you do? What happened?" And that was the switch. So I think that's so interesting. I love this educator of music. That's really interesting. In your work, are you trying, like, what's your expectation for the next book you're writing? Like, is it, I want to sell 1,000,000 copies, or is it, I want to create something I love, or I want to create something that moves kids or inspires kids? Like, how do you manage your own expectations in your work?
Well, the quick answer is yes, I want to do all that. But the more thoughtful answer that I think I could provide is I get asked this in a different form by elementary kids all the time, which is why do you want to be an author? And whether it's writing the Band Nerds books, which are all about taking what you do seriously, but not yourself too seriously, or 1,000 No's, or I have another book out that's all about learning to communicate in different ways called Do You Speak Fish? I believe that we all have a responsibility to find a way, or to find out how we can contribute positively to the world. Whether that's through music education, we all have different hills, right? So Tim, did you imagine 20 years ago that you would be running this super successful podcast, right? And so that journey is ongoing, right? And I have chosen I've discovered, first of all, that I think a skill set that I have is to be able to provide the words to start a conversation about really complicated topics. So a lot of my children's books are all about emotions, kindness, communication, social emotional learning, those aspects of it. Imagine talking to a kid about it, how do you, as a parent, a new parent, how do you talk to a kid about apathy or, anxiety? If you've not, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I can help provide the words that would start the conversation. And I did that in the Band Nerds books too. There's all these like multi-layered humorous metaphors that hopefully will spark questions and really make us think about it. So my expectation for myself is, first of all, that I'm open to changing those expectations and being aware of where I can make a difference. That's I have to live my own truth here. And actually I could tell you a funny story about 1,000 No's with that down the road. But, and then second of all, that's kind of my North Star right now, because that's where I can make the biggest impact in my community, in my world, for my children. And I think it's important that my kids see me exploring, even at my age, versus, I saw a quote on, where all the best quotes are, which of course is Instagram. And everybody's giving their life lessons, but one stood out, which was, so the quote that I saw on Instagram was about you decide who you're going to be and solidify that between like ages 18 and 25. And I think that is such that it's very representative of what we value in the pop world right now, right? It's like, if you're not, if you haven't like figured it out and made it big by 25, forget about it. Which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because I didn't know anything. Even if I would have been a millionaire and successful, I still didn't know anything until I gained so much more life experience. And I really think we need to change how we value expertise and experience. Part of it is because we all think we can figure things out on the internet. We don't need expertise anymore. And I know there's a huge debate about that. I'm definitely on one side of that argument.
There's a debate about that? That doesn't seem debatable to me. I mean, we clearly need experts. But anyway, moving on. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so, I really think that we need to pace ourselves when we talk about expectations too, because like I said before, we had this idea of like growing up, this is what it's supposed to be, and you had it planned out. But, I feel like I didn't really start to experience life in a really meaningful and thoughtful way until like my late 30s. And then I had a lot of regrets that I didn't ask the right questions of people that I lost by the time I got to that place, to gain that. And so I think, when you talk about, you were giving me, whether it makes the edit or not, you were giving me some really wonderful life advice. I do think the one regret I do have about getting older is missing the chance to talk to people that we don't have with us anymore, because I think that would have helped shape my perception about what could be. So when I joke about age, I think it's more about regret of missing out on things, of conversations I didn't have that I wish I was smart enough to ask questions before it was too late.
But now, DJ, you are smart enough, so have those conversations now that you can have, right? So this is the 100%. Point. Like you get, yeah. we learn experience, we grow, we become more mature, have more expertise, we figure ourselves out, and then like we blossom, and I think most people take lots of unexpected turns in their careers. Mine certainly did. Here I am. And so I think most people make their biggest contribution to the world in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I think that's absolutely true. So even though look, I was a damn great band director in my 20s. Like I was a good band director. My band got superiors, won contests, the whole thing. But you know what? All of a sudden I find myself as a full-time professional music arranger. And you know what? Man, the bands I write for are winning contests, and like they sound, what am I doing now? All of a sudden I'm doing something else. Like, listen, everybody, let your expectations go. Just know you're going to be twists, turns, be open to whatever, because as you grow and change and mature, life opens up possibilities. And DJ, I think this is exciting for you, because in the work you're doing, you're finding that. I know, like the next book, you're gonna write something that's going to be fantastic that you can't even imagine today.
Oh,
And it might not
uh,
happen until you're 72, and it doesn't matter. You have it in you. You're going to continue making those contributions you're talking about. So just
yeah.
trust that as long as you're growing and you're improving and you're trying hard, the world will take you where you need to go, and get some of those expectations out of the way. Because if you think this is the way it has to be, and we've all been
Right.
there. I was going to be a band director my whole life, and I had to do this. But you know what? I love my life, and I love the contribution I'm making, and I love what it's brought to me. And um, so I think this is really resonating with me, and I hope it is with people that are listening, because expectations are a good thing to have. Like, you need to have goals, you need to think you know where you're going, but expectations are also a way to bring a lot of pain, because you're probably not going to meet them. And if you can back off, I think one of the points is, if you back off and you like, let me see where this goes, let me be open to the journey that this year's show or this year's band or this next trip that my band's going to take, or the next piece I'm going to hand out, it might not take me where I think it's going to go, but it could be somewhere really great, and it could be exactly what I and my students really, really need.
Yeah. You know what's a good metaphor for that too is when a student doesn't want to switch instruments and they end up switching and becoming like
Mm,
amazing at it.
yeah.
Like I remember played trombone, and I was a trombone player. That's all I wanted to play. And then, somebody decided to, put this thing called the euphonium in front of me, and I was like, what? I was like, no. And then they're like, oh, you can have solos. I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then and then I ended up being a better euphonium player than trombone player. I think the first thing you have to do, Tim, though, is to tell your listeners whether or not you take health insurance for this type of therapy. I love it. Thank you. And then the other part I wanted to add, and you talked about, first of all, I love hearing you say the words, I love your life. It's a heart, or I love my life. It's just a wonderful thing to hear somebody say. And the one thing that when we talk about getting rid of expectations, and when we move forward, there's this fear of losing what we had. And
Mm,
you are always going to be a band director. You're always, like, nobody can take that away from you,
yeah.
right? And guess what? Like, you're a music arranger. You're a podcast host or producer, whatever you want to call yourself, because you don't need permission from anybody to be called those things. That was actually I met John Hughes, the late producer, at a retail job years ago, and he says to me, we got into a conversation. It was really awesome. He goes to me, he goes, "Hey, what do you want to do? Like, what are you trying to do?" Implying that I didn't want to work retail my whole life. And I said, well, I'm trying to be a writer. And he said, well, have you written anything? I said, yeah. He goes, well, then you're a writer. And
Right.
man, that changed my life.
Right.
Like you don't need permission to be called a musician. You're a musician when you play music, or you read music, or you sing, or you do it. You're a writer the minute you put something on paper. You're a teacher the minute you educate. Like
Right.
we think that you need to be discovered through American Idol, and that's the only way to get validated as a singer, right? Or the voice, or whatever. Take your pick. And that's not what it is. Like, I remember I called myself an author before anybody else called me an author, and that was a really empowering moment.
Yeah, I have this conversation with people a lot. I love that you're onto this now, because if you like to draw things, you're an artist. So
Yeah,
you can say, I want to be an artist. Well, maybe you mean like, I want to have a career as an artist. Okay, but you know what? Like you said, you're an artist. I have a friend who is a bodybuilder, but he wasn't calling himself a bodybuilder because he wasn't like getting on stage. But I'm like, are you training like a bodybuilder? Are you like, busting your ass in the gym like 5 or 6 days a week? He's like, yes. I'm like, you're a bodybuilder. You need to start calling yourself that. So like
yeah,
everybody, like whatever you like, what are you doing? This is what you are. And I love, DJ, your point. It adds. I'm a band director and a podcaster and a music arranger, and now you know what? I've become a baker. And
yeah.
over the quarantine, I've started baking things. Like, I can make a damn good pie, and then you know what? I'm all these things. Well, I don't want to limit myself.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that I would be all these things back when I was 25 and supposedly knew everything. So let's be open, everybody, to what life brings you. Be open, lower your expectations, be open. Don't be limited by your expectations. I like that phrase better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't narrow your perception at all. Like, it's all expectations can do um, some great harm because, first of all, you're always your worst critic, right? So it never feels good. And some of the best advice I got were actually, when I was their boss, they came to me and they said, DJ, um, we like you as a boss, but like we feel like your compliments are backhanded. I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And I said, please tell me, because this person was like well liked, like amongst the team, and I was like, oh, this is a big deal. So my ears were wide open. And he said, it's not like you don't mean them, but you don't take enough time to celebrate the wins. You're always going to the next thing, right? So it's like, oh, that was good, but we can do better. That was good, but we can do better, right? Because I have this expectation of where we need to get to. And imagine a band director that never gave like positive feedback and just said, you can do better. And then hit it under the guise of like, I'm pushing them to make them feel better, right? Like, or to make them into better, harder people or whatever it is. Instead of taking the time to celebrate those wins, and letting go of your expectations of where you think something should be up there. I think that's a huge lesson for band directors to have, because kids want to know that they're succeeding, and taking time to celebrate the wins.
Yeah, we need to start wrapping this up, unfortunately. But I will tell you, to that point, I can tell you that the greatest experiences I've ever had watching a marching performance or a Broadway show or any kind of performance, it was never the perfect one. It was the one where the emotion and the feeling and all that was there. And all of us know that if we stop and think about it. I'm working hard to let go of my expectations as a perfectionist. That's one of the things I've been thinking about. The other thing I love too, DJ, is you are also, this also requires us to be very vulnerable and sort of authentic in our world. And that's a conversation I've been having a lot with people over the last couple of years, actually over the last 3 or 4 years. People started talking about being authentic and honest and vulnerable in front of their students. Because if you are vulnerable and authentic in front of your students, you give them the opportunity to be that back to you, which is a wonderful, wonderful gift you can give anyone. So that's in the mix of this conversation. I'm a little bit off on a tangent, but we need to start
social emotional learning wrapped up here.
Yeah, no, we need to start wrapping up. Unfortunately, I mean, I would sit here and talk. I love this. Obviously, we're both really energized by this conversation. I love this topic. But what would you want to say as we're starting to wrap this up? Final thoughts, or something you want to make sure people take away?
Well, I feel like I left a lot of it on the table. But what I would ask of everyone, is, the world's a tough place. But it's also filled, not to be cliche, but it also filled with a lot of beauty. Relax, have a cupcake, chill out. We're going to get there together. We need to make things, we need to learn to listen to each other. We need to have respect for people, for each other. I really feel like there's great wisdom in lessons that were already learned. So let's make new mistakes. Let's really talk to each other about our past misses. When you're talking about that vulnerability, like, here's what I learned. My next book that's coming out is actually about me passing on my mistakes to my daughter so that she can make new mistakes, so she can learn from that. So I just encourage everybody else to do that as well. That's like my serious moment for the topic, I guess.
Well, BJ, I love that you are, I mean, really everything that you've discussed about the work you're doing, it's like good stuff. It's important stuff that people need, that the world needs, that students need. So I hope everybody go check out your stuff. Just search for DJ Corchin in all the different places in the world that you can find it. And I love that you're doing this work. So keep fighting that good fight and being honest and vulnerable in the work you're doing. And I like that you're helping, a young reader tackle things that are hard, and you're helping to give them those words. Like, that's such an admirable thing to be doing. So I just want to say thank you
Wow.
for doing that work.
Well, I appreciate that. I think there's a parallel there with the work that you're doing and amplifying voices that way too. So thank you.
Well, thank you. So, all right, this has been so much fun. Everybody check out DJ stuff. DJ, hopefully you'll come back and we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, no, for sure. Anytime. I could talk for hours.
I've enjoyed this very much. Thanks for talking to me.